Hi, this is Barry Haimo. Thanks for tuning in to another dose of bite-sized bits of knowledge where we give you a meaningful amount of information in a short amount of time. Today, I'm going to go over what I would call the top mistakes that we see in estate planning. Let's jump right in. Number one, not understanding that you have an estate. Leave the door open for how it's going to unfold. And it's going to be a surprise to everybody, we promise you that. One of the things that can happen is the estate goes through probate. Another thing that can happen is the estate goes through guardianship. We've talked about these in other videos, so we're not going to get into them today. But the bottom line is that probate, guardianship, and the surprises that can happen if you don't have a plan are the consequences of not having a plan. Having the right people versus the wrong people can make a significant difference. When it comes to day-to-day rights and day-to-day needs, financial, medical, decision-making, who you're seeing, where you're going, those are things that you're either going to decide for yourself or the court's going to decide for you. When there's families that get along and it's a beautiful, harmonious, picture, it's less of an issue. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. So when you don't have these documents in place, you're having basically rolling the dice that the court's going to appoint somebody that you would have hoped would be the right person, the most appropriate person, the most caring person, the most responsible person. When it comes to inheritance, people don't understand that blended families will have usually a different result depending on which spouse dies first. A lot of times in blended families, all the kids are our kids. We love them all equally. Even though they're not mine, they're mine. But under the law, that's not the case. Under the law, they're not yours, and they're not going to get anything from you. So if you go first, your kids that you want to be your kids will not be included. I would say another issue would be assets being disorganized. Having assets all over the place is it's disorganized, and it's a pain in the ass to keep, on top of, for one thing. But when something happens to you and somebody else has to come into the picture, they have to figure it out. So if you have a great spreadsheet with all of this organized, that's helpful, but by no means eliminates the problem. If you don't know where those assets are, you're setting this person up for a lot of trouble, and it's going to be very expensive to figure it out. That I can assure you. You're setting your family up for a problem. A big mistake that we see a lot is not being mindful of retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, life insurance. These assets are exempt from creditors. These assets don't go to probate if they're done right. They go over probate. They go outside the toll booth of probate. If you screw that up and they're not entered correctly, or if your advisor screws it up, because it happens too, the bottom line is if it's not accurate, it might go to the wrong person. It might be confusing as to what happens to it. It has to go to court for interpretation. If it goes to the estate for some reason, which is possible, we're dealing with numerous cases right now where that's inadvertently happened. The estate picks it up, and now it's part of the probate, which it shouldn't have been. It's subject to creditors in the probate, which it shouldn't have been, and it's now subjected to adverse taxes, which it shouldn't have been. So it's just a waste. So be careful with your retirement accounts. Another thing is going back to the advanced care directives that I mentioned about taking care of you during life. It's very common where family members, there's one caregiver that's like taking care of you and helping you with your doctor's appointments, your pills, your medications, your pharmacy pickups, your doctor runs, food shopping, paying bills, and the other kids are not helping. And that pisses you off and you want to do something about it. The only way to do something about it is to do your planning. If you don't do your planning, they're all the same. They're all treated equally. And you may end up with a situation where the children that are less caring and involved are in a position of power that you really would prefer to have the caring and helpful child. And that's just a decision you're going to have to make. It's not going to be made for you. Homestead is often a nice little tripwire. They bury it under the dirt. It's like a hole with like one of those little bear traps. There's 3 parts of homestead. The part that trips up people the most is the inheritance portion. It goes to spouse and minor kids, whether you like it or not. prenup or postnup can mitigate that, but breaking the rules results in a different set of rules, which is often very surprising and challenging. Surviving spouse, surviving spouse will get a portion of your estate if you disinherit him or her. Move to Georgia if that's unacceptable. The amount that he or she can claim is 30% of the elective estate. The elective estate includes the probate estate plus other things that are outside the probate estate. It brings it back in and it's divvied up in the court. I would say the most interesting and most problematic issue with not planning ahead is litigation. Even if you do plan ahead, it can go into litigation. So it's important to strengthen your files and do it right at the right time. Doing your planning and then passing away in a week, where you're cutting somebody out, is a recipe for litigation. Not necessarily because you didn't have the capacity or you were forced to do it, but because a picture can be painted that way. And that picture, painting that way, is expensive to overcome. So the timing of your planning is actually quite important. Messing that up can be consequential.